Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Before we begin today's victim story, I know it's annoying, but I need to ask for your support by subscribing to the channel here. I'm a new and small channel on YouTube, as you can see, and a simple click on the like button can help me a lot. So please subscribe to support me, click the like button and leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. Now, let's get to the case. The first rays of dawn crept through the blinds, casting thin lines of light across Jade Thompson's face. Her eyes fluttered open, a smile already forming on her lips. Today was the day she'd been waiting for, her chance to prove herself worthy of the upcoming surfing competition. Jade threw off her covers and bounded out of bed, her long blonde hair a tangled mess. She padded over to her window and drew the blinds, revealing the pink and orange sky over New Smyrna Beach. The sight of the ocean in the distance made her heart race with anticipation. "Jade, breakfast in 15, her mother's voice called from. "Downstairs, coming, Mom," Jade replied, her voice still husky from sleep. She quickly changed into her favorite wetsuit, the black and teal one that made her feel invincible. As she zipped it up, her eyes fell on the surfing trophies lining her shelves. Each one represented countless hours of practice, determination, and the pure joy of riding the waves. Today, she'd take another step towards her dream of becoming a professional surfer. Jade grabbed her bag and surfboard, then bounded down the stairs, taking them two at a time. The smell of pancakes and bacon filled the air, making her stomach growl. In the kitchen, her parents were already seated at the table. Her father, Mark, was engrossed in his tablet, likely checking the surf report. Her mother, Sarah, was plating up breakfast, her face etched with a mix of pride and concern. "Morning, champ," Mark said, looking up from his tablet with a grin. "Waves are looking good today. You ready to show Coach Wilson what you've got?" Jade plopped down in her chair, reaching for a stack of pancakes. "You bet, Dad. I've been working on that aerial I showed you. I think today's the day I nail it." Sarah set a glass of orange juice in front of Jade, her brow furrowed. "Just be careful out there, honey. You know how I worry." Jade resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Her mother's concern was touching, but sometimes it felt suffocating. "Mom, shall be fine. I've been surfing these waters since I could walk." I know, Sarah sighed, sitting down with her own plate. "It's just, well, you know how New Smyrna Beach is. They don't call it the shark attack capital of the world for nothing." Mark lowered his tablet, shooting his wife a reproachful look. "Sarah, don't put that in her head. Jade knows what she's doing." Jade swallowed a mouthful of pancake, trying to ignore the sudden knot in her stomach. Her mother wasn't wrong. New Smyrna Beach was infamous for its shark encounters, but Jade had never let that stop her before, and she wasn't about to start now. "Really, Mom, it's okay," Jade said, reaching out to squeeze her mother's hand. "Coach Wilson and the lifeguards are always keeping an eye out, and besides, sharks aren't interested in skinny surfer girls like me." Sarah managed a small smile. "I suppose you're right. Just promise me you'll be aware of your surroundings, okay?" Jade nodded, shoveling the last of her breakfast into her mouth. She glanced at the clock and jumped up. "Gotta run, don't want to be late." She kissed both her parents on the cheek, grabbed her gear, and headed for the door. "Knock 'em dead, kiddo," her father called after her. The morning air was crisp and salty as Jade pedaled her bike down the quiet streets, her surfboard strapped securely to the side. The anticipation built with each turn of the wheels, the promise of the waves calling. To her, as she approached the beach, she could see other surfers already gathering. The parking lot was filling up with cars, surfboards strapped to roofs and poking out of trunks. Jade locked up her bike and jogged towards the group, her board tucked under her arm. "Jade, over here," a familiar voice called out. She turned to see her best friend and fellow surfer, Mia, waving enthusiastically. Beside her stood their coach, Wilson, his weathered face creased in a smile. "Morning, Mia." "Morning, Coach," Jade called back, joining them on the sand. Coach Wilson nodded approvingly as she approached. "Right on time, Thompson. How are you feeling today?" Jade grinned, her earlier nerves dissipating in the face of her excitement. "Ready to tear it up, Coach. Those waves don't stand a chance." Wilson chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "That's what I like to hear. All right, team, gather round." The rest of the surf team joined them, a mix of excited chatter and yawns filling the air. Coach Wilson raised his voice to be heard over the crashing waves. Listen up, everyone. We've got perfect conditions today, so I want to see you all pushing. Yourselves, remember, the state championships are just around the corner. This is your chance to show me what you've got. He turned to Jade, his expression serious. Thompson, I hear you've been working on that aerial. Today's the day to give. Hit a shot, but only if you feel ready. No unnecessary risks, understood? Jade nodded, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. Understood, coach, I've got this. As the team began their warm-up exercises on the beach, Jade couldn't help but steal glances at the ocean. The waves were indeed perfect, rolling in with a rhythm that seemed to match her heartbeat. She could almost feel the spray on her face, the rush of adrenaline as she'd pop up on her board. Mia nudged her, grinning. Earth to Jade. You in there? Jade blinked, realizing she'd stopped mid-stretch. Sorry, just taking it all in, you know. Mia nodded, her eyes sparkling with understanding. I get it. It's like the ocean's calling your name, right? But hey, don't psych yourself out. You've got this. As they finished their warm-up, Coach Wilson gave them a final pep talk. All right, team. Remember your training, trust your instincts, and most importantly, have fun out there. Now get in the water and show me what you've got. The team cheered, grabbing their boards and racing towards the waves. Jade paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. This was it. This was her moment. To shine, she ran into the water, the cold shock making her gasp. But as she pushed through the breaking waves, all her worries melted away. This was where she belonged. Jade paddled out beyond the break, sitting up on her board to survey the waves. The sun was higher now, turning the water into a glittering expanse of blue. She could see her teammates catching waves, their whoops of joy carrying across the water. A perfect swell was building. Jade's heart raced as she turned her board ready to catch it. This was the one. She could feel it. As she began to paddle, time seemed to slow down. The roar of the wave filled her ears, drowning out everything else. She felt the surge of water lift her board, and in one fluid motion she popped up to her feet. The world rushed back into focus as she rode the face of the wave, the spray stinging her cheeks. Jade's body moved on instinct, years of practice guiding every shift of her weight, every turn. She approached the lip of the wave, her mind focused on one thing, the aerial. It was now or never. Jade crouched low, then exploded upward, launching herself and her board into the air. For a breathless moment, she was flying, suspended above the churning water. She grabbed the rail of her board, twisting her body for the rotation. The landing was rough, but she stuck it. A triumphant yell burst from her lips as she rode out the rest of the wave, her heart pounding with exhilaration. As she paddled back out, she could hear cheers from the beach. Coach Wilson was pumping his fist in the air, and Mia was jumping up and down. Jade couldn't keep the grin off her face. This was just the beginning. She was ready for whatever challenges the ocean had in store for her. Little did she know, beneath the glittering surface, something was stirring. Something that would test her in ways she could never have imagined. The vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean stretched out before New Smyrna Beach, its surface deceptively calm in the early morning. Light. Beneath the waves, however, a different world thrived, one of constant motion, primal instincts, and the eternal dance of predator and prey. In the deeper waters offshore, a large bull shark glided effortlessly through the water. Its powerful, stocky body, nearly 11 feet long, cut through the ocean with barely a ripple. The shark's small, beady eyes scanned its surroundings constantly, its highly developed senses alert for any sign of potential prey. This particular bull shark was a female, and she was hungry. It had been days since her last substantial meal, and the pangs of hunger drove her ever closer to the shore. Bull sharks were known for their ability to tolerate fresh water and their tendency to hunt in shallow coastal areas, making them one of the species most likely to encounter humans. As she swam, smaller fish darted out of her path, their instincts warning them of the apex predator in their midst. The shark paid them no mind. They were too small to satisfy her hunger. She was looking for something larger, something that would provide the energy she needed. Closer to the shore, the water began to lighten, the sun's rays penetrating the shallower depths. The bull shark's keen senses picked up on the increased activity near the surface. She could detect the vibrations of movement, the faint electrical signals of living creatures. Intrigued, she moved closer, her powerful tail propelling her forward with silent efficiency. On the beach, oblivious to the approaching predator, people were starting to arrive for a day by the ocean. Families set up umbrellas and spread out, towels on the sand, while early morning joggers left footprints along the water's edge. Among the beachgoers was marine biologist Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who was conducting her regular shoreline survey. She walked along the beach, notebook in hand, jotting down observations about the local ecosystem. As she worked, a lifeguard approached her. "Morning, Dr. Rodriguez," he called out. "Anything interesting today?" Elena looked up, shielding her eyes from the sun. "Morning, Tom. Nothing out of the ordinary so far. How are things looking from your end?" Tom shrugged. "Pretty quiet. We've got that junior surfing team out there." He gestured towards the water where Jade and her teammates were practicing. "But otherwise, it's been an easy morning." Elena nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. "That's good to hear. You know, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. We've been picking up more bull shark activity in the area lately. Nothing alarming, but it might be worth keeping an extra eye out." Tom's brow furrowed. "Bulls? That's not great news. They can be pretty aggressive, can't they?" "They can be," Elena confirmed. "But remember, attacks are still incredibly rare. Bulls are curious by nature, and sometimes that curiosity can lead to exploratory bites. The important thing is to stay calm and be aware of your surroundings." As they spoke, more beachgoers arrived, filling the air with chatter and laughter. Children ran towards the water, squealing with delight as the cool waves lapped at their feet. Out in the water, the bull shark continued her approach. The vibrations from the surfboards above piqued her interest. To her primitive brain, they resembled the movements of large fish or perhaps seals, potential prey. Back on the beach, Jade's coach, Wilson, was instructing the team from the shore. He cupped his hands around his mouth, shouting to be heard, over the sound of the waves. "Jade, great form on that last one. Try to get a bit more height on your next attempt." Jade, paddling back out after catching a wave, gave him a thumbs up. She was feeling confident, riding the high of her successful aerial earlier. As she waited for the next set of waves, she chatted with her teammate Mia. "Did you see that last one?" Jade asked, grinning. "I think I'm really getting the hang of it." Mia nodded enthusiastically. "You're killing it out there. Keep this up, and you'll be unbeatable at the championships." As they talked, neither of them noticed the dark shape moving beneath the surface, drawing ever closer. The bull shark, now just yards away from the surfers, was growing increasingly curious. The unfamiliar shapes and movements above her were intriguing, triggering her predatory instincts. She began to circle, her dorsal fin occasionally breaking the surface. On the shore, Elena's trained eye caught the brief flash of the fin. Her heart rate quickened as she realized what she was seeing. She turned to Tom, her voice urgent. "Tom, I think I just spotted a shark fin out there, near the surfers." Tom's eyes widened. He quickly raised his binoculars, scanning the area Elena had indicated. After a tense moment, he lowered them, his face grim. "I see it. Looks like a big one, too. We need to get those kids out of the water." He reached for his radio, calling in to the other lifeguards. "This is Tom at Tower 3. We've got a confirmed shark sighting near the surf team. I'm initiating an evacuation. Sound the alarm." Moments later, a loud siren blared across the beach. People looked up in confusion, some already beginning to gather their belongings. Coach Wilson's head snapped up at the sound of the alarm. His eyes scanned the water, looking for any sign of danger. When he spotted the fin, his blood ran cold. "Everyone out of the water!" he shouted, his voice hoarse with fear. "Now! Paddle in calmly but quickly!" In the water, the surfers heard the alarm and their coach's shouts. A ripple of panic spread through the group as they realized what was happening. "Shark!" someone yelled, and suddenly everyone was paddling frantically towards the shore. Jade felt her heart pounding in her chest as she lay flat on her board, paddling as fast as she could. The shore seemed impossibly far away. She could hear the panic in her friends' voices, could feel the fear radiating off them in waves. Beneath the surface, the bull shark sensed the sudden change in the human's behavior. The rapid movements, the spike in heart rates. To her, these were the signs of prey and distress. Her predatory instincts, honed over millions of years of evolution, took over. She surged upwards, drawn by the thrashing of the panicked surfers. Her powerful jaws opened, rows of sharp teeth gleaming in the filtered sunlight. On the beach, everyone watched in horror as the massive shape breached the surface, its dark body arcing through the air before crashing back down amidst the fleeing surfers. Eleanor gasped, her scientific detachment momentarily forgotten in the face of the unfolding drama. "It's a bull shark," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the screams from the water. "And it's hunting." Tom was already in motion, grabbing a rescue board and sprinting towards the water. Other lifeguards were doing the same, their training kicking in despite the terror of the situation. In the water, chaos reigned. Surfers were screaming, paddling, desperately for the safety of the shore. The bull shark, driven by instinct and hunger, circled the group, her mere presence enough to send waves of panic through the teenagers. Jade found herself at the back of the group, her earlier confidence replaced by gut-wrenching fear. She could see the shark's fin cutting through the water, drawing ever closer. Each passing second felt like an eternity as she paddled, her arms burning with the effort. As the bull shark approached, its primitive brain focused solely on the potential. Meal before it, the stage was set for a confrontation that would forever change the lives of everyone on New Smyrna Beach that fateful morning. Jade's arms burned as she paddled, her heart pounding in her ears. The shore seemed impossibly far away, but she forced herself to remain calm. Panic would only make things worse. She could hear the shouts from the beach, see the lifeguards racing towards the water on their rescue boards. "Keep moving, Jade," Mia called out from a few yards ahead. "Don't stop." Jade nodded, gritting her teeth as she pushed herself harder. The water around her was chaos, with surfers paddling frantically in all directions. Some had abandoned their boards entirely, choosing to swim instead. Through the pandemonium, Jade's trained eye caught sight of something that made her breath catch in her throat. A perfect wave was forming just behind them. In any other circumstance, it would have been the kind of wave surfers dream about. Now, it was a potential death sentence. Jade knew that the wave would propel them towards shore faster than they could to paddle. But it would also stir up the water, possibly confusing or exciting the shark even more. It was a risk she had to take. "Guys!" she shouted to the nearest surfers. "Big wave coming! Get ready to catch it!" A few heads turned towards her, eyes wide with fear and confusion, but they understood. This was their best chance. As the wave approached, Jade positioned herself, muscle memory taking over despite the terror coursing through her veins. She could feel the water beginning to lift her board. "Now!" she yelled, pushing herself up just as the wave caught her. For a brief, surreal moment, Jade felt a familiar thrill as she rode the face of the wave. It was almost like any other day out on the water. Then reality came crashing back as she caught sight of a dark shape moving beneath the surface. The bull shark, drawn by the increased activity, was circling closer. Its dorsal fin broke the surface just yards away from where Jade was riding the wave. On the beach, Coach Wilson watched in horror as the scene unfolded. He could see Jade silhouetted against the wave and the ominous fin approaching her. "Jade!" he screamed, his voice hoarse. "Look out!" But his words were lost in the roar of the wave and the general chaos. All he could do was watch, helpless, as the distance between Jade and the shark decreased with each passing second. In the water, Jade was focused solely on staying on her board and getting to shore as quickly as possible. She was dimly aware of movement in her peripheral vision, but didn't dare take her eyes off her path. Suddenly, a voice cut through her concentration. "Jade! Behind you!" It was Mia, who had managed to catch the same wave and was now riding parallel to Jade. Her face was a mask of terror as she pointed frantically behind Jade. Time seemed to slow down as Jade turned her head. The bull shark was there, so close she could see its beady eye fixed on her. Its mouth was open, rows of serrated teeth gleaming in the morning sun. In that moment, all of Jade's training, all her years of experience in the water, crystallized into a single desperate move. She shifted her weight abruptly, using all her strength to veer her board sharply to the left. The sudden movement threw off her balance. Jade felt herself falling, the world spinning around her as she plunged into the water. The shock of the cold ocean jolted her system, momentarily disorienting her. As she struggled to right herself, Jade felt something brush against her leg. It was rough, like sandpaper. The realization of what it was sent a jolt of adrenaline through her body. Jade kicked out blindly, her foot connecting with something solid. She heard a strange sound, almost like a grunt, and then the presence was gone. Breaking the surface, Jade gasped for air, her eyes wild as she searched for her board. It was floating a few feet away. She swam towards it with frantic strokes, hauling herself onto it with strength born of pure terror. "Jade!" Mia's voice came from nearby. She had wiped out when Jade made her sudden move, but had managed to stay on her board. "Are you okay?" Jade nodded, unable to speak as she tried to catch her breath. She looked around, realizing they were much closer to shore now. The wave had carried them a good distance before they fell. The lifeguards had reached them now. Tom, the guard who had been talking to Dr. Rodriguez earlier, pulled up alongside Jade on his rescue board. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes scanning her for any signs of injury. Jade shook her head. I don't think so. It touched me, but I don't think it bit." Tom nodded, his face grim. "Okay, let's get you to shore. Can you paddle, or do you need help?" The thought of staying in the water any longer than necessary galvanized Jade into action. "I can paddle," she said, already starting to move. As they made their way to shore, Jade could hear the commotion on the beach. People were shouting, pointing out towards the water. She resisted the urge to look back, focusing instead on the safety of the sand ahead. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jade felt her board scrape against the bottom. She half paddled, half stumbled the last few yards until she was out of the water. Coach Wilson was there in an instant, helping her up and wrapping a towel around her shoulders. "Jade, thank God you're all right. I thought, when I saw that fin..." "Behind you," Jade nodded, her body starting to shake as the adrenaline wore off. "I'm okay, Coach. I think I kicked it." Wilson's eyebrows shot up. "You kicked it? Jesus, Jade." Dr. Rodriguez approached them, her face a mix of concern and professional interest. "Jade, I'm Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a marine biologist. I know this is difficult, but can you tell me exactly what happened out there? It's important for our records and for understanding shark behavior." Jade took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. "I was riding the wave, trying to get to shore. Then I heard Mia yell. I turned and saw the shark. It was so close. I could see its eye. I just reacted. I turned my board hard and fell off. When I was in the water, I felt it brush against my leg. I kicked out, and I think I hit it. Then it was gone." Elena nodded, jotting notes in her notebook. "That's incredibly lucky, Jade. Bull sharks are known for their aggressive behavior. The fact that it didn't pursue you after that initial contact is unusual." "Maybe I scared it off," Jade said, attempting a weak smile. "Maybe you did," Elena replied, her tone serious. "Sharks often retreat after unexpected resistance. Your quick thinking may have saved your life." As they talked, the beach was a flurry of activity. Lifeguards were doing a head count, making sure all the surfers were accounted for. Parents who had heard about the incident were arriving, frantic, to find their children. Jade's parents pushed through the crowd, their faces pale with worry. Sarah, her mother, pulled Jade into a tight embrace. "Oh, honey, we came as soon as we heard. Are you all right?" Jade nodded into her mother's shoulder, suddenly feeling very young and vulnerable. "I'm okay, Mum. Just a little shaken up." Her father, Mark, stood nearby, his hands clenched into fists. "What happened out there? How could this happen during a supervised practice?" Coach Wilson stepped forward, his face haggard. "Mr. Thompson, I take full responsibility. We had no warning. The shark just appeared." "It's not Coach Wilson's fault, Dad," Jade interrupted. "These things, they just happen sometimes. We know. The risks when we go out there." Mark's expression softened slightly. He reached out and put a hand on Jade's shoulder. "I'm just glad you're safe, sweetheart." As the initial shock began to wear off, Jade found herself surrounded by her teammates. They were all talking at once, a mix of concern and excited recounting of the event. "Dude, you kicked a shark," one of the boys exclaimed. "That's hardcore." Mia pushed through the group, throwing her arms around Jade. "I thought I was going to watch my best friend get eaten by a shark," she said, her voice muffled against Jade's shoulder. "Don't ever scare me like that again." Jade hugged her back, feeling a lump form in her throat. The reality of what had just happened was starting to sink in. She had come face to face with one of nature's most perfect predators and survived. As the group began to disperse, Dr. Rodriguez approached Jade one more time. "Jade, I know this has been a traumatic experience, but I want you to know that what happened today was incredibly rare. Sharks aren't mindless killing machines. They're a vital part of our ocean ecosystem. Your encounter, while terrifying, can teach us a lot about shark behavior and help us better protect both humans and sharks in the future." Jade nodded, understanding the importance of what Elena was saying, even as she struggled with her own mixed emotions. "I know. I've always loved the ocean, Dr. Rodriguez. I don't want to let this change that." Elena smiled warmly. "That's a very mature attitude, Jade. The ocean is still your home. Just remember to always respect it and the creatures that live there." As Jade walked off the beach with her parents, she couldn't help but cast one last look at the ocean. The water sparkled in the morning sun, beautiful and inviting as ever. But now she knew firsthand the power and danger that lurked beneath its surface. It was a lesson she would never forget, a moment that would shape the rest of her life both in and out of the water. The world exploded into chaos as the bull shark's massive jaws clamped down on Jade's right leg. The searing pain ripped through her body, a scream of pure agony tearing from her throat as she was violently pulled underwater. "Jade!" Mia's terrified shriek pierced the air, quickly drowned out by the rush of water as Jade was dragged beneath the surface. Underwater, everything became a blur of bubbles and thrashing limbs. Jade's survival instincts kicked in, overriding the paralyzing fear and excruciating pain. She remembered the advice she'd once heard: "Go for the eyes." With desperate strength, she clawed at the shark's face, her fingers scraping against its rough skin. The shark shook its head violently, its powerful body twisting in the water. Jade felt her leg tear further, warm blood clouding the water around her. The metallic taste filled her mouth as she fought to hold her breath, lungs burning for air. On the surface, pandemonium erupted. Mia's scream had alerted everyone to the attack. Coach Wilson's face drained of color as he realized what was happening. "Shark attack!" he bellowed, his voice cracking with panic. "Everyone out of the water now!" The other surfers didn't need to be told twice. They paddled frantically towards shore, terror etched on their faces. But Mia hesitated, torn between self-preservation and the desperate need to help her friend. "Mia, get out of there!" Coach Wilson shouted, already sprinting towards the lifeguard station. On the beach, Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched in horror as the scene unfolded. Her scientific detachment evaporated in an instant, replaced by gut-wrenching fear for the young surfer. "Tom!" she yelled to the nearest lifeguard. "It's got one of the kids!" Tom was already moving, grabbing a rescue board and charging into the surf. Other lifeguards followed suit, their training kicking in despite the terror of the situation. Beneath the waves, Jade continued her desperate struggle. Her lungs screamed for air, black spots dancing at the edges of her vision. In a last frantic attempt, she jammed her thumb into what she hoped was the shark's eye. The bull shark recoiled, its jaws loosening just enough for Jade to wrench her mangled leg free. With the last of her strength, she kicked towards the surface, her good leg propelling her upwards. Jade broke the surface with a gasping cry, gulping in air between sobs of pain and fear. "Help!" she managed to choke out, struggling to stay afloat as blood poured from her injured leg. Mia, who had been paddling towards shore, heard Jade's cry and immediately turned back. "I'm coming, Jade!" she shouted, her voice trembling with fear but determination clear in her eyes. "Mia, no!" Jade yelled back, seeing the dark shape circling beneath her. "Get out of here!" But Mia ignored her, paddling furiously towards her friend. She reached Jade just as Tom, the lifeguard, arrived on his rescue board. "Get her on the board," Tom ordered, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Together, they managed to haul Jade onto the rescue board. The extent of her injuries became clear as they did so. Her right leg was a mangled mess of flesh and blood, the wetsuit torn to shreds. "Oh God, oh God," Mia whimpered, her face pale as she took in the damage. "Keep it together," Tom snapped, though his own face had lost all color. "We need to get her to shore now. Mia, you stay close to the board. I'll paddle us in." As they began to move, the water around them suddenly churned. The bull shark, drawn by the scent of blood, was coming back for a second attack. It's coming. Pack! Mia screamed, her eyes wide with terror. Tom saw the approaching dorsal fin and made a split-second decision. He pulled a small device from his belt, a shark shield, an electronic deterrent designed to repel sharks. "Hold on," he yelled, activating the device and dropping it into the water. The effect was immediate. The approaching shark veered off sharply, clearly distressed by the electronic pulses emitted by the shark shield, but Tom knew it wouldn't keep the predator away for long. "Paddle," he shouted to Mia. "Paddle as fast as you can." On the beach, a crowd had gathered, watching in horror as the rescue unfolded. Jade's parents, alerted by the commotion, pushed through the throng, their faces masks of terror. "That's my daughter," Sarah Thompson screamed, trying to run into the water only to be held back by Coach Wilson. "Let the lifeguards handle it," he said, his own voice shaking. "They're trained for this." Dr. Rodriguez was on her phone, her voice urgent. "This is Dr. Elena Rodriguez at New Smyrna Beach. We need emergency services immediately. Shark attack victim, teenage female, severe leg injury." As they neared the shore, more lifeguards entered the water to assist. They formed a human chain, creating a barrier between the rescue board and the circling shark. Finally, they reached the shallows. Tom and another lifeguard lifted Jade from the board, carrying her onto the beach, where paramedics were waiting with a stretcher. "Jade!" Sarah cried, rushing to her daughter's side. "Oh my God, my baby!" Jade was barely conscious, her skin pale and clammy from blood loss. The paramedics worked quickly, applying pressure to her wound and starting an IV. BPs dropping. 1. Paramedic announced, "We need to move now." As they loaded Jade into the ambulance, Dr. Rodriguez approached the paramedics. "This was a bull shark attack," she informed them. "The victim may need antibiotics to prevent infection from the bacteria in the shark's mouth." The lead paramedic nodded gratefully. "Thanks, Doc. We'll relay that to the hospital." Sarah climbed into the ambulance with Jade, clutching her daughter's hand. Mark Thompson stood on the beach, watching helplessly as the ambulance sped away, its sirens wailing. Back on the beach, the aftermath of the attack was surreal. The other surfers huddled together, many of them in tears. Mia sat on the sand, wrapped in a shock blanket, staring blankly at the ocean. Coach Wilson approached her, his face etched with guilt and concern. "Mia, are you hurt?" Mia shook her head, slowly. I saw it happen," she whispered. "1 second Jade was there, and then there was so much blood." Wilson put a comforting hand on her shoulder, fighting back his own tears. "You were incredibly brave out there, Mia. You helped save Jade's life." Meanwhile, Dr. Rodriguez was conferring with the lifeguards and local authorities. "We need to close the beach immediately," she insisted. "That shark is still out there, and it's in a feeding frenzy now." Tom nodded grimly. "Agreed. We'll put up the red flags and make an announcement. But Doc, what brought a bull shark this close to shore? It's not common, even for New Smyrna." Elena shook her head. "It could be any number of factors. Changes in water temperature, unusual prey movements, even just bad luck. We'll need to conduct a thorough investigation." As the beach was evacuated and warning flags raised, news of the attack spread quickly. Within hours, news vans and reporters descended on New Smyrna Beach, all clamoring for details of the horrific event. Out in the water, unseen by the chaos on shore, the bull shark continued to circle. The primitive drive that had led it to attack was still present, but now mixed with a new wariness. It had encountered unexpected resistance, and for the moment, it retreated to deeper waters, leaving behind a community forever changed by its brief violent visit to the shallows of New Smyrna Beach. The beach erupted into chaos as Coach Wilson's desperate cry pierced the air. "Shark attack, everyone out of the water now." His voice, usually so calm and authoritative, cracked with panic as he sprinted towards the lifeguard station. Beachgoers, who moments ago had been enjoying the sunny morning, now scrambled to their feet, eyes wide with horror as they realized what was happening. Parents snatched up their children, abandoning towels and beach toys in their haste to get away from the water's edge. Tom, the lead lifeguard, was already in motion before Wilson reached him. He grabbed his rescue board and whistle, his training kicking in despite the adrenaline surging through his veins. "Sound the alarm," he shouted to his colleague. "Get everyone off the beach." The shrill sound of the emergency siren cut through the air, adding to the growing pandemonium. People who hadn't heard Wilson's initial shout now looked up in confusion and fear, quickly joining the mass exodus from the beach. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who had been conducting her shoreline survey, found herself in the middle of the unfolding crisis. She rushed towards the lifeguard station, her scientific mind racing to process what was happening. "Tom," she called out as she reached him. "What's the situation?" Tom's face was grim as he prepared to enter the water. "Shark attack. One of the young surfers. I'm going in for rescue." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. "Do you need assistance? I'm trained in marine animal behavior. I could—" "Stay here," Tom cut her off. "We need you on shore. Help coordinate the evacuation and be ready. With first aid." Without waiting for a response, he charged into the surf, powerful strokes carrying him towards the chaos in the water. On the beach, Jade's parents, who had been watching their daughters practice from afar, suddenly realized the unthinkable was happening. Sarah Thompson's scream cut through the air as she saw the thrashing in the water where Jade had been. "No, Jade!" she cried, trying to run towards the water. Her husband, Mark, caught her arm, his own face pale with shock. "Sarah, no, we can't," he started, but Sarah wrenched her arm free. "That's our daughter out there," she shouted, tears streaming down her face. Coach Wilson intercepted them, his own eyes wild with fear and guilt. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, please, you have to stay back. The lifeguards are handling it." "Handling it?" Mark roared, his fear turning to anger. "How could you let this happen? You were supposed to be watching them." Wilson flinched as if he'd been struck. I don't know how. We've never had a shark come this close before." As the adults argued, Mia, Jade's best friend who had been in the water with her, stumbled onto the beach. She was soaking wet, her board abandoned in the surf, and her face was a mask of shock and terror. "Mia!" Wilson called out, rushing to her. "Are you hurt? Where's Jade?" Mia's voice came out as a hoarse whisper, her eyes unfocused. It took her under. There was so much blood. I tried to help, but..." Her words were drowned out by another anguished cry from Sarah Thompson. Mark held his wife tightly, both of them watching the water with desperate hope. Meanwhile, Dr. Rodriguez had taken charge on the beach. She was directing people away from the water's edge, her voice calm but authoritative. "Everyone needs to move back at least 100 yards from the shoreline. Please remain calm and follow the lifeguards." Instructions. As she worked, she kept one eye on the water, her scientific mind racing. Bull sharks were known to hunt in shallow waters, but an attack this close to shore was still unusual. Something must have drawn it in. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of more emergency services. Police cars and an ambulance screeched into the beach parking lot, their sirens adding to the cacophony. Elena rushed to meet them, quickly briefing the paramedics. "Possible shark attack victim. Teenage female. Lifeguards are attempting rescue now. Be prepared for severe trauma and blood loss." The paramedics nodded grimly, unloading their equipment and moving as close to the water's edge as was safe. Out in the water, Tom had reached the site of the attack. The sea around him was tinged red with blood, and he could see Jade's limp form being supported by another surfer, Mia, who had bravely stayed behind to help her friend. "I've got her," Tom called out, maneuvering his rescue board alongside them. "Help me get her on the board." Together they managed to haul Jade's unconscious body onto the rescue board. Tom's stomach lurched as he saw the extent of her injuries. Her right leg was a mangled mess, the wetsuit torn to shreds and blood pulsing from deep gashes. "We need to move now," he shouted to Mia. "That shark could come back any second. Stay close to the board." As they began to paddle towards shore, the water around them suddenly churned. The bull shark, drawn by the scent of blood, was circling back. "Oh, God," Mia whimpered, her eyes wide with terror. Tom made a split-second decision. He pulled a small device from his belt, a shark shield, an electronic deterrent designed to repel sharks. "Hold on," he yelled, activating the device and dropping it into the water. The effect was immediate. The approaching shark veered off sharply, clearly distressed by the electronic pulses. But Tom knew it wouldn't keep the predator away for long. "Paddle!" he shouted to Mia. "Paddle as fast as you can." On the beach, the crowd watched in tense silence as Tom and Mia fought their way back to shore. Sarah Thompson had collapsed too, her knees on the sand, her husband holding her tightly as they waited in agony. As the rescue team approached the shallows, more lifeguards entered the water to assist. They formed a human chain, creating a barrier between the rescue board and the circling shark. Finally, they reached the beach. Tom and another lifeguard lifted Jade's limp form from the board, carrying her swiftly to where the paramedics waited. "Jade!" Sarah cried, breaking free from her husband's grasp and running to her daughter's side. "Oh my God, my baby!" The paramedics worked quickly, assessing Jade's injuries and starting emergency treatment. "Severe lacerations to the right leg, possible arterial damage," one called out. "BP's dropping, we need to move now." As they prepared to load Jade into the ambulance, Dr. Rodriguez approached, her face grave. "This was a bull shark attack," she informed them. "The victim may need specialized antibiotics to prevent infection from the bacteria in the shark's mouth." The lead paramedic nodded gratefully. "Thanks, Doc. We'll relay that to the hospital." Sarah climbed into the ambulance with Jade, clutching her daughter's hand. Mark stood on the beach, watching helplessly as the ambulance sped away, its sirens wailing into the distance. In the aftermath of the rescue, the beach was a scene of controlled chaos. Police were setting up a perimeter, keeping curious onlookers and newly arrived press at bay. Lifeguards were ensuring all other swimmers and surfers were accounted for and safe. Coach Wilson stood apart from the crowd, his face ashen. He flinched when Dr. Rodriguez approached him. "Coach," she said gently, "I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you some questions about what happened. It could help us understand why the shark came so close to shore." Wilson nodded numbly. I don't understand. We've practiced here for years. Never had more than the occasional small shark sighting." Elena's voice was compassionate but firm. "Shark behavior can be unpredictable, Coach. This isn't your fault. But any information you can provide could be crucial." As they talked, Mia sat wrapped in a shock blanket, staring blankly at the ocean. A police officer was trying to question her, but she seemed unable to form coherent responses. Tom, the lifeguard who had led the rescue, approached them. His face was grim, but there was a determined set to his jaw. "Dr. Rodriguez, we need to close the beach. That shark is still out there, and it's in a feeding frenzy now." Elena nodded in agreement. "Absolutely. We should also alert the neighboring beaches. If this shark is behaving unusually aggressively, it could pose a threat up and down the coast." The authorities began the process of closing the beach and alerting the public. News of the attack spread like wildfire. Within hours, news vans and reporters descended on New Smyrna Beach, all clamoring for details of the horrific event. The peaceful morning had transformed into a nightmare, leaving a community in shock and a young surfer fighting for her life. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting its light on the now empty beach, the usually inviting waters of New Smyrna Beach seemed ominous and forbidding, hiding untold dangers beneath their deceptively calm surface. The wail of the ambulance. Siren pierced the air as it sped through the streets of New Smyrna Beach, carrying the critically injured Jade Thompson. Inside, paramedics worked feverishly to stabilize her condition, their practiced hands moving with urgent precision. "BP's dropping, 90/60, one paramedic called out, his voice tense. "Heart rates elevated, 120 BPM. Sarah Thompson clutched her daughter's hand, her face pale with fear. "Please, baby, stay with us," she whispered, her voice choked with tears. The lead paramedic, a veteran named Mike, turned to Sarah. "Ma'am, I need you to tell me if Jade has any allergies or medical conditions we should know about." Sarah shook her head, struggling to focus. No allergies. She's always been healthy. She's a competitive surfer. She's in great shape." Mike nodded, turning back to Jade. The girl's skin was ashen, her breathing shallow. The makeshift tourniquet on her leg was soaked through with blood. "ETA to Halifax Health Medical Center?" Mike called to the driver. 4 minutes, came the response. Mike grimaced. 4 minutes could be an eternity in a situation like this. He turned back to his patient, checking her vitals again. "Hang another unit of ONEG," he instructed his partner, "and increase the flow rate. We need to get ahead of this blood loss." As they worked, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was Mark, Jade's father. "Sarah, how is she?" His voice was frantic on the other end of the line. "It's bad, Mark," Sarah choked out. "There's so much blood, they're doing everything they can." "I'm on my way to the hospital now," Mark said. "I'll meet you there. She's going to be okay, Sarah. Our girl is strong." The call ended, and Sarah looked back at her daughter's pale face. Jade had always been so full of life, so vibrant. Seeing her like this was like a nightmare Sarah couldn't wake up from. The ambulance screeched to a halt outside the emergency department. The back doors flew open, and a team of doctors and nurses swarmed around the stretcher. 16-year-old female. "Shark attack victim," Mike reported as they rushed Jade inside. "Severe lacerations to the right leg, possible arterial damage. She's lost a lot of blood. BP's low, heart rate elevated." Dr. Amelia Chen, the lead trauma surgeon on duty, took charge immediately. "Get her to Trauma 1, she ordered. "I want a full blood panel, type and cross-match. Page orthopedics and vascular, and someone get me Dr. Ruiz from infectious diseases. Shark bites can lead to nasty infections." As they wheeled Jade into the trauma room, a nurse gently held Sarah back. "I'm sorry, Mom, but you can't go in there. We'll update you as soon as we can." Sarah stood in the hallway, feeling helpless as she watched the doors close behind her. "Daughter," a social worker approached her, offering a comforting presence. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Lisa from Patient Services. Is there anything you need? Perhaps some water? Or would you like me to show you to the waiting area?" Sarah nodded numbly, allowing Lisa to guide her to a quiet corner of the waiting room. As they walked, Lisa spoke softly. "Your daughter is in good hands, Mrs. Thompson. Dr. Chen is one of the best trauma surgeons in the state." Inside the trauma room, it was controlled chaos as the medical team worked to save Jade's life. Dr. Chen's voice rose above the din, issuing rapid-fire orders. "I need a better look at this leg. Get me a portable X-ray and someone call the OR. Tell them to prep for emergency surgery." As a nurse cut away what remained of Jade's wetsuit, Dr. Chen examined the wounds. The shark's teeth had left deep, jagged lacerations across Jade's thigh and calf. In some places, the cuts went almost to the bone. "Jesus," Dr. Chen muttered. "Okay, people, we've got our work cut out for us. Let's start with controlling this bleeding." Meanwhile, back at New Smyrna Beach, the aftermath of the attack was unfolding. Police had cordoned off the area, and news vans were beginning to arrive, their satellite dishes stretching towards the sky. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood with Tom, the lifeguard who had rescued Jade, giving a statement to the local authorities. "It was a bull shark, probably around 8 to 9 feet long," Elena explained. "They're known to be aggressive, but an attack this close to shore is unusual." The police officer nodded, jotting notes. "Any idea what might have attracted it?" Elena shook her head. "It could be any number of factors: changes in water temperature, unusual prey movements. We'll need to conduct a thorough investigation." Tom, still in his wetsuit, spoke up. "What about the other beaches? Should they be closed too?" "Absolutely," Eleanor agreed. "We need to alert all the coastal towns in the area. This shark could be a threat up and down the coast." As they talked, Mia sat nearby, wrapped in a shock blanket. A counselor from Victim Services was trying to talk to her, but Mia's eyes were fixed on the ocean, her expression distant. "Mia," the counselor said gently, "can you tell me what happened out there?" Mia blinked, slowly turning to face the counselor. We were just surfing. Jade had caught this amazing wave. She was so happy." Mia's voice broke. "Then suddenly, she was just gone." There was so much blood, the counselor nodded sympathetically. "You were very brave to stay and help your friend. You probably saved her life." Mia shook her head, tears starting to fall. "But what if it's not enough? What if she doesn't make it?" Back at the hospital, Mark Thompson had arrived, rushing to join Sarah in the waiting room. "Any news?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Sarah shook her head. "They took her into surgery. They said the damage is extensive. They're doing everything they can." Mark pulled his wife into a tight embrace, his own eyes filling with tears. "She's going to pull through this, Sarah. Our Jade is a fighter." Hours passed, feeling like an eternity to Jade's parents. Finally, Dr. Chen emerged from the OR, her surgical cap still on, looking exhausted but determined. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," she said, approaching them. They stood up immediately, their faces a mix of hope and fear. "Jade made it through the surgery," Dr. Chen began. and Sarah let out a sob of relief. But I want to be clear, she's not out of the woods yet. The damage to her leg was severe. We've managed to repair the major blood vessels and stabilize the bone, but there's significant muscle and nerve damage. What does that mean for her recovery? Mark asked, his voice shaking. Dr. Chen's expression was grave. It's too early to say for certain, but I want you to be prepared. There's a possibility that Jade may not regain full use of her leg. We're going to do everything we can, but the road ahead is going to be long and difficult. Sarah's knees buckled, and Mark had to support her. But she'll live, Sarah managed to ask. Dr. Chen nodded. Barring any complications, yes, your daughter is incredibly strong. The fact that she survived such a severe attack is testament to that. As the Thompsons absorbed this news, Dr. Chen continued. We've started her on a course of powerful antibiotics to prevent infection, which is a major concern with shark bites. She's in recovery now, and once she's stable, we'll move her to the ICU. You'll be able to see her then. Mark nodded, trying to process everything. Thank you, Doctor, for everything. As Dr. Chen left to check on her patient, Sarah and Mark held each other. Their emotions a complex mix of relief, fear, and uncertainty about what the future held for their daughter. Outside the hospital, the sun was setting on one of the most traumatic days in New Smyrna Beach's history. The usually bustling beaches were empty, red flags warning of the danger still lurking in the waters. In the fading light, Dr. Rodriguez stood on the shore with a team of marine biologists who had arrived to investigate the attack. They watched as a patrol boat made another sweep of the area, searchlights probing the darkening waters. We'll start a full assessment at first light, Eleanor said to her colleagues. Water temperature readings, sonar sweeps, the works. We need to understand why this happened and do everything we can to prevent it from happening again. As night fell, the community of New Smyrna Beach tried to come to terms with the day's events. In homes across the town, families hugged their children a little tighter. Surfers looked at their boards with newfound trepidation, and everyone's thoughts turned to the brave young girl fighting for her life in the hospital. The ocean, usually a source of joy and recreation, now seemed ominous and unpredictable. But as the stars came out over the Atlantic, there was also a sense of resilience, a determination to understand, to heal, and to find a way to coexist with the wild and sometimes dangerous natural world that surrounded them. The rhythmic beeping of medical equipment filled the intensive care unit where Jade Thompson lay, her body still and pale against the stark white hospital sheets. Tubes and wires snaked around her, monitoring every vital sign as she fought for her life. Sarah Thompson sat vigil by her daughter's bedside, her eyes red-rimmed from hours of crying. She held Jade's hand gently, careful not to disturb the IV lines. "Come on, baby," she whispered. "You've got to wake up. You've got to fight." Mark Thompson paced at the foot of the bed, his face haggard with worry. Every few minutes, he'd glance at the monitors, trying to decipher their readings. Dr. Amelia Chen entered the room, her white coat crisp despite the long hours she'd been working. She nodded to the Thompsons and moved to check Jade's vitals. "How is she, Doctor?" Mark asked, his voice hoarse. Dr. Chen's face was serious but not unkind. "She's stable for now. The next 24 hours will be critical. We're watching closely for any signs of infection or complications from the blood loss." Sarah looked up, her eyes pleading. "But she'll wake up, right? She'll be okay." Dr. Chen placed a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Your daughter is incredibly strong, Mrs. Thompson. The fact that she survived such a severe attack is remarkable. But I want to be honest with you. We're not out of the woods yet. When Jade does wake up, she's going to face a long, challenging recovery." Mark moved to stand beside his wife, his hand on her back. "What kind of challenges are we looking at, Doctor?" Dr. Chen took a deep breath. "The damage to Jade's leg was extensive. We've managed to save the limb, but there's significant muscle and nerve damage. It's likely she'll need multiple surgeries and intensive physical therapy, and I think it's important that you're prepared. There's a possibility that Jade may not regain full use of her leg." Sarah let out a choked sob, and Mark's face paled. "Are you saying she might not be able to walk?" he asked. "It's too early to say for certain," Dr. Chen replied. "Every case is different, and Jade is young and was in excellent physical condition before the attack. That works in her favor. but I want you to be prepared for a long, difficult road ahead. As the gravity of the situation sank in, a knock at the door interrupted them. A nurse poked her head in. "Dr. Chen, there's someone here from the Volusia County Marine Science Center. Says she needs to speak with you about the shark attack victim." Dr. Chen nodded. "I'll be right there." She turned back to the Thompsons. "I'll be back to check on Jade in a bit. Try to get some rest if you can. She's going to need your strength in the days to come." Outside in the hallway, Dr. Chen found Dr. Elena Rodriguez waiting, her face etched with concern. "Dr. Rodriguez," Chen greeted her. "I understand you're here about Jade Thompson." Elena nodded. "Yes, I was on the beach when the attack happened. I'm a marine biologist specializing in shark behavior. I wanted to check on Jade's condition and also provide some information that might be crucial to her treatment." Dr. Chen raised an eyebrow. "What kind of information?" "Bull shark bites can lead to particularly nasty infections," Elena explained. "Their mouths contain a wide variety of bacteria that don't respond to typical antibiotics. I wanted to make sure you were aware and could adjust her treatment accordingly." Dr. Chen's expression turned thoughtful. "We've started her on a broad-spectrum antibiotic, but you're right. We may need to reconsider our approach. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Dr. Rodriguez. Would you mind consulting with our infectious disease specialist?" The two doctors walked away, discussing treatment options. The elevator doors opened and Mia, Jade's best friend, stepped out. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she clutched a small stuffed dolphin, Jade's lucky charm that she always kept. In her beach bag, Mia approached the nurse's station, her voice shaky. "Excuse me, I'm here to see Jade Thompson. I'm her friend." The nurse looked up, her expression sympathetic. "I'm sorry, honey, but visitation is restricted to family only right now. Jade's in the ICU." Mia's face fell, tears welling up in her eyes. "Please, I was there when it happened. I need to see her. I need to know she's okay." Mark Thompson, who had stepped out of Jade's room for a moment, overheard the exchange. He approached Mia, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Mia, what are you doing?" "Here, sweetheart." Mia turned, relief washing over her face at the sight of a familiar person. "Mr. Thompson, I had to come. I couldn't just sit at home not knowing. How is she?" Mark's face was grave. "She's hanging in there, Mia. It's pretty serious." Mia's lower lip trembled. "This is all my fault. If I had been faster, if I had seen the shark sooner." No, Mia," Mark said firmly, pulling her into a hug. "This is not your fault. You helped save Jade's life. You were incredibly brave out there." As Mark comforted Mia, back in Jade's room, Sarah continued her quiet vigil. She stroked her daughter's hair, carefully avoiding the tubes and wires. "Do you remember your first surfing competition, Jade?" Sarah whispered. "You were so nervous. You thought you were going to throw up. But the moment you hit the water, it all melted away. You were like a little mermaid out there." Sarah's voice broke as she continued. "You need to find that strength. Now, baby, you need to fight like you've never fought before. We're all here waiting for you to come back to us." As if in response to her mother's words, Jade's fingers twitched slightly in Sarah's hand. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Jade. Jade, can you hear me?" Jade's eyelids fluttered, and slowly, painfully, she opened her eyes. For a moment, confusion clouded her gaze, then pain and fear flooded in as awareness returned. Mom? Jade's voice was barely a whisper, raspy from the breathing tube that had been removed earlier. "Oh, Jade!" Sarah cried, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Yes, baby, I'm here. You're okay. You're in the hospital, but you're okay." Jade's eyes darted around the room, panic rising in her voice. What happened? My leg. It hurt so much." Sarah stroked her daughter's face, trying to keep her calm. "There was an accident, sweetie. A shark. But you're safe now. The doctors are taking good care of you." Jade's breathing quickened as fragments of memory came rushing back. The wave, the dark shape in the water, the searing pain. "A shark? Oh God." Sarah pressed the call button urgently as Jade became more agitated. Dr. Chen rushed in, quickly assessing the situation. "Jade, I'm Dr. Chen. You're safe now. I need you to try to stay calm, okay? Take slow, deep breaths." "For me." As Dr. Chen worked to stabilize Jade, Mark and Mia entered the room, alerted by the commotion. Mia's eyes widened at the sight of her friend, pale and frightened in the hospital bed. "Jade!" Mia cried out, rushing to the bedside. Jade's eyes locked onto her friend, a lifeline to normality in the midst of this nightmare. "Mia! You're okay?" Mia nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm fine. Oh, Jade, I was so scared. I thought I'd lost you out there." As the initial shock of waking subsided, Jade became more aware of her body, of the pain radiating from her leg. Fear clouded her eyes as she looked at Dr. Chen. "My leg. Am I going to be okay?" Dr. Chen's face was serious, but kind. "You've been through a tremendous ordeal, Jade. Your leg was badly injured, but we've done everything we can to repair the damage. You're going to need more surgeries and a lot of physical therapy, but you're young and strong. We're going to do everything we can to get you back on your feet." Jade closed her eyes, tears seeping from beneath her lashes. Will I ever surf again?" The room fell silent, the question hanging heavy in the air. It was the question they had all been afraid to ask, the one that cut to the heart of who Jade was. Dr. Chen took a deep breath. "I wish I could give you a definitive answer, Jade. The truth is, we don't know yet. Your recovery is going to be a long process, and a lot will depend on how you heal and how hard you work in physical therapy. But I want you to know that we're going to do everything in our power to give you the best chance possible." Jade nodded slowly, her eyes opening to look at her parents, at Mia, at the doctor. Despite the pain and fear, there was a glimmer of the fighter they all knew her to be. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I can do this. I have to try." As Jade drifted back to sleep, exhausted by the brief period of consciousness, her family and friends exchanged looks of cautious hope. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but Jade was awake, she was fighting, and for now that was enough. Outside the hospital, New Smyrna Beach was grappling with the aftermath of the attack. Beaches remained closed as marine biologists and local authorities worked to understand what had happened and how to prevent future incidents. The community rallied around the Thompsons, offering support and prayers for Jade's recovery, and somewhere, out in the vast Atlantic, a bull shark continued its ancient existence, unaware of the lives it had forever changed with one fateful encounter. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Jade's hospital room, casting a warm glow on the sterile surroundings. It had been 3 days since she'd woken up, and the reality of her situation was slowly sinking in. Jade lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, her right leg elevated and heavily bandaged. The pain was a constant presence, dulled only slightly by the medication flowing through her IV. A gentle knock on the door roused her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, her voice still weak. Dr. Chen entered, clipboard in hand and a reassuring smile on her face. "Good morning, Jade. How are you feeling today?" Jade attempted a smile, but it came out more like a grimace. "About the same, I guess. The pain's still pretty bad." Dr. Chen nodded sympathetically as she checked Jade's vitals. "That's to be expected. You've been through a tremendous trauma. We'll keep monitoring your pain levels and adjust your medication as needed." As Dr. Chen examined Jade's leg, carefully unwrapping the bandages, Jade steeled herself to ask the question that had been haunting her. "Dr. Chen, when can I start physical therapy? I need to get back in shape for surfing." The doctor's hands paused for a moment, and she looked up at Jade with a mixture of compassion and concern. "Jade, I know you're eager to get back to your normal life, but we need to take this one step at a time. Your body needs time to heal before we can start any intensive therapy." Jade's face fell, tears welling up in her eyes. "But the longer I wait, the more muscle I'll lose. I can't lose surfing. It's everything to me." Dr. Chen sat on the edge of the bed, her voice gentle but firm. "I understand how important surfing is to you, Jade, but right now our priority is saving your leg and ensuring you can walk again. Surfing is a goal we can work towards, but it's going to be a long journey." As Jade struggled to come to terms with this, her parents entered the room. Sarah rushed to her daughter's side while Mark hung back, his face etched with worry. "How's our girl doing this morning?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice upbeat. Dr. Chen stood, addressing both Jade and her parents. "Jade's healing is progressing as well as can be expected. The antibiotics seem to be keeping infection at bay, which is crucial. However, I want to discuss the next steps with you all. Mark moved closer, his hand resting protectively on Jade's shoulder. What kind of next steps? We're looking at another surgery, Dr. Chen explained. The initial surgery was primarily to repair the major blood vessels and stabilize the bone. Now that Jade is more stable, we need to address the muscle and nerve damage. Jade's breath caught in her throat. Another surgery? But what about physical therapy? When can I start working on getting stronger? Dr. Chen's expression was sympathetic but firm. Jade, I know you're eager to start your recovery, but we need to make sure we've done everything we can surgically before we begin physical therapy. Rushing into it could do more harm than good. As the reality of her situation sank in, Jade felt a wave of despair wash over her. The thought of more surgery, more time confined to this bed, was almost unbearable. Sarah, sensing her daughter's distress, quickly changed the subject. Jade, honey, your friend Mia called this morning. She'd like to come visit if you're feeling up to it. Jade nodded, grateful for the distraction. Yeah, that'd be nice. As Dr. Chen left to prepare for rounds, promising to return later to discuss the surgery in more detail, Jade's parents exchanged worried glances. They could see the toll this was taking on their daughter, not just physically but emotionally as well. Later that afternoon, Mia arrived, a forced cheerfulness in her demeanor that couldn't quite mask her concern. She carried a small duffel bag with her. Hey, Surf Sister, Mia said, trying to keep her voice light. I brought you some things from home. Thought it might cheer you up. Jade managed a small smile. Thanks, Mia. It's good to see you. As Mia unpacked the bag, pulling out Jade's favorite books, her lucky shark tooth necklace and some photos of their surfing adventures, the facade began to crack. Jade, I'm so sorry, Mia said, her voice breaking. If I had seen the shark sooner, if I had warned you. Jade reached out, grasping Mia's hand. No, Mia, this isn't your fault. You helped save my life out there. Mia nodded, wiping away tears. I've been to the beach every day, you know. It's so weird without you there. The whole vibe has changed. Everyone's on edge. Jade's eyes widened. They've reopened the beach? But what about the shark? Mia shook her head. No, it's still closed, but there are scientists everywhere taking water samples, doing sonar sweeps. They're trying to figure out why the shark came so close to shore. As they talked, Jade felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of her was glad life was going on, that efforts were being made to understand what had happened, but another part felt left behind, trapped in this hospital room while the world moved on without her. Have you been back in the water? Jade asked hesitantly. Mia looked down, guilt written across her face. No, I can't. Every time I look at the ocean now, all I can see is you and the blood and... Jade squeezed her friend's hand. It's okay, Mia. I get it. I don't know if I'll ever be able to go back in either. The admission hung heavy in the air between them. For two girls who had lived and breathed surfing for as long as they could remember, the thought of never returning to the waves was almost unthinkable. As evening approached, a new visitor arrived, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the marine biologist who had been on the beach the day of the attack. Jade, I'm Dr. Rodriguez. I was hoping I could talk to you about what happened, if you're feeling up to it. Jade nodded, a mix of curiosity and apprehension on her face. Yeah, okay. Elena pulled up a chair, her manner gentle but professional. First, I want you to know how impressed everyone is with your bravery and strength. What you've been through is extraordinary. Jade managed a weak smile. Thanks, I don't feel very brave, though. Eleanor nodded understandingly. That's normal, but Jade, I was hoping you could tell me what you remember about the shark. Any details could help us understand why this happened and how we might prevent it in the future. Jade closed her eyes, trying to recall the terrifying moments before the attack. It all happened so fast. I was just about to catch a wave. I remember seeing a shadow in the water, but I thought it was just, I don't know, a school of fish or something. As Jade recounted the attack, her voice trembling, Elena listened intently, jotting down notes. When Jade finished, Elena looked up, her expression thoughtful. Jade, based on what you've described and the nature of your injuries, we're almost certain it was a bull shark. They're known to be aggressive and often hunt in shallow waters, but an attack this close to shore is still unusual. Jade's brow furrowed. So why did it happen? Why me? Elena sighed. That's what we're trying to figure out. There could be many factors. Changes in water temperature, unusual prey movements, even human activities that might have attracted the shark closer to shore. But I want you to know, Jade, that this wasn't your fault. Sharks don't target humans specifically. It was a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. As they continued to talk, Jade found herself torn between fear and fascination. Part of her wanted to know everything about the creature that had so drastically altered her life, while another part wanted to forget it had ever happened. As the day drew to a close and visitors left, Jade found herself alone with her thoughts. The weight of her uncertain future pressed down on her, threatening to overwhelm her. She glanced at the photos Mia had brought, images of happier times when the ocean was a source of joy rather than terror. With a shaking hand, she reached for her shark tooth necklace, a gift from her father after her first surfing competition. She had always seen it as a good luck charm, a connection to the ocean she loved. Now it felt like a cruel joke. As she clutched the tooth, tears began to fall. The pain, the fear, the uncertainty, it all came crashing down on her. In the quiet of her hospital room, Jade Thompson, the young surfing prodigy who had always been so strong, so fearless, finally allowed herself to break down and cry. Outside her window, the sun set over New Smyrna Beach, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The ocean, once Jade's greatest love, now loomed as an unpredictable force, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. As night fell, the beachfront lay empty, the usual sounds of laughter and surf replaced by the lonely call of seagulls and the endless rhythm of the waves. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the hospital room as Jade Thompson gritted her teeth, sweat beading on her forehead. Her physical therapist, a muscular man named Steve, stood beside her, offering encouragement as she struggled to bend her injured leg. "That's it, Jade. Just a little more." "You're doing great," Steve urged, his voice a mix of firmness and compassion. Jade let out a frustrated groan, her fingers gripping the edge of the therapy table. "It hurts, God, it hurts so much." It had been 6 weeks since the shark attack, and Jade was deep in the throes of her rehabilitation. The second surgery Dr. Chen had mentioned had gone as well as could be expected, repairing more of the damaged muscle and nerve tissue in her leg. But the road to recovery was proving to be longer and more grueling than Jade had ever imagined. Steve nodded sympathetically. "I know it does, but pain is part of the process. It means you're healing, getting stronger." Jade closed her eyes, taking a deep breath before attempting to bend her leg again. The movement sent shockwaves of pain through her body, but she managed to increase the angle slightly. "Good job," Steve exclaimed. "That's definite progress from last week." As they finished the session, Jade couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and frustration. Yes, she was making progress, but it felt agonizingly slow. Would she ever get back to where she was before? The question haunted her daily. Later that evening, as Jade rested in her hospital bed, her parents arrived for their daily visit. Sarah's face lit up as she entered the room carrying a small potted plant. "Hi, sweetie," Sarah said, placing the plant on the windowsill. "I thought this might brighten up the room a bit." Mark followed close behind, his eyes immediately going to Jade's leg. "How was therapy today?" Jade shrugged, trying to muster a smile. "It was okay. Steve says I'm making progress." Her father nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "That's great. Honey, you've always been a fighter." As they settled in for their visit, a knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Chen entered, accompanied by a man Jade didn't recognize. "Good evening, Jade, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," Dr. Chen greeted them. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to introduce you to someone. This is Dr. Michael Stern. He's a psychiatrist who specializes in trauma recovery." Jade tensed immediately. "A psychiatrist? I don't need a shrink. I'm fine." Dr. Chen's expression was gentle, but firm. "Jade, recovering from a traumatic event, like what you've been through, isn't just about healing physically. It's important to address the emotional impact as well. Dr. Stern stepped forward, his manner calm and non-threatening. Hi, Jade. I'm not here to force anything on you, I just thought we could talk. Sometimes it helps to have someone objective to listen, especially when you're going through something this challenging. Jade looked away, her jaw set stubbornly. I said I'm fine. I don't need to talk about my feelings or whatever. Sarah reached out, touching her daughter's arm. Honey, maybe it wouldn't hurt to give it a try. We've all been so focused on your physical recovery, but we're worried about you. You've been through so much. Jade's eyes flashed with anger. Worried about me? I'm stuck in this hospital bed. I can barely move my leg, and I don't know if I'll ever surf again. Of course I'm not okay. Talking about it isn't going to change any of that. The room fell silent, the outburst hanging heavy in the air. Dr. Stern spoke up, his voice calm. You're right, Jade. Talking won't magically fix everything. But bottling up these feelings isn't helping either, is it? Jade felt tears welling up in her eyes, frustration and fear overwhelming her. I don't know who I am without surfing. It's been my whole life. And now I don't know if I'll ever even be able to go in the ocean again without panicking. Dr. Stern nodded understandingly. That's a completely normal reaction to what you've been through. What you're experiencing is a form of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's very common in survivors of animal attacks. Jade looked up, a mix of surprise and relief on her face. Really? I thought PTSD was something only soldiers get. It's a common misconception, Dr. Stern explained. PTSD can affect anyone who's been through a traumatic event. What you're feeling, the fear, the uncertainty about your future, it's all part of processing the trauma. As they continued to talk, Jade found herself opening up more than she had in weeks. She talked about the nightmares that plagued her sleep, vivid recreations of the attack that left her waking up in a cold sweat. She shared her fears about the future, her frustration with the slow pace of her recovery, and the guilt she felt for putting her family through this ordeal. By the time Dr. Stern left, promising to return for regular sessions, Jade felt emotionally drained, but somehow lighter. It was as if a weight she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying had been lifted slightly. The next morning, Jade woke to find Mia sitting by her bedside, a nervous smile on her face. Hey, Surf Sister, Mia said, her voice tentative. I've got some news. Jade pushed herself up in bed, curiosity piqued. What's up? Mia took a deep breath. They're reopening the beach today, not for swimming or surfing yet, just for people to walk on the sand. There's going to be a little ceremony. A lot of people from town are going to be there. I thought you might want to know. Jade felt her heart rate quicken, a mix of longing and fear washing over her. Oh, that's good, I guess. Mia nodded, watching her friend's reaction carefully. Yeah, Dr. Rodriguez and her team haven't seen any sign of the shark in weeks. They think it's moved on to deeper waters. As Mia continued to talk about the reopening plans, Jade found her mind wandering. She could almost feel the sand between her toes, smell the salt in the air. But along with those pleasant memories came flashes of terror. The dark shape in the water, the searing pain, the taste of blood in her mouth. Jade? Are you okay? Mia's concerned voice snapped her back to reality. Jade blinked, realizing she'd zoned out. Yeah, sorry, I wish I could be there. Mia's face lit up. Well, actually, I talked to Dr. Chen, and she said if you're feeling up to it, we could take you to the beach for the ceremony. In a wheelchair, of course, and only for a little while. But she thinks it might be good for you to see the ocean again, to face your fears a bit. Jade felt her breath catch in her throat. The idea of seeing the ocean again filled her with equal parts longing and dread. I don't know, Mia. I'm not sure I'm ready. Mia reached out, squeezing her friend's hand. It's okay if you're not. No one's going to force you. But I'll be right there with you if you want to try. So will your parents. And Dr. Chen and probably half the town. You've got a whole community behind you, Jade. As Jade considered the offer, Dr. Stern's words from the previous day echoed in her mind. Facing her fears head-on was part of the recovery process. Maybe this was a step she needed to take. Okay, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll go. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Nurses helped Jade get dressed in real clothes for the first time in weeks, careful of her still healing leg. Her parents arrived, a mix of concern and cautious optimism on their faces as they helped her into a wheelchair. The drive to the beach was tense, Jade's anxiety growing with each familiar landmark they passed. As they approached the shore, she could see a crowd gathered on the sand. Colorful banners fluttered in the breeze, and a makeshift stage had been set up. As they helped Jade onto the beach, the crowd parted, creating a path for her wheelchair. Faces both familiar and unknown turned to her, many with tears in their eyes. She saw her teammates from the surf club, local business owners, and even tourists who had been there on the day of the attack. Mayor Thompson stepped up to the microphone, his voice carrying over the sound of the waves. Today we gather not just to reopen our beloved beach, but to celebrate the strength and resilience of our community. In particular, we want to honor one of our own, Jade Thompson. Jade felt her cheeks flush as all eyes turned to her. The mayor continued, Jade's courage in the face of unimaginable danger and her ongoing fight to recover have inspired us all. She reminds us that while the ocean can be unpredictable and sometimes dangerous, it is also a source of joy, beauty, and life. As the mayor spoke about the new safety measures being implemented and the importance of respecting marine life, Jade found her gaze drawn to the ocean. The waves rolled in gently, the water sparkling under the afternoon sun. It was beautiful, just as she remembered, but now she knew firsthand the power and danger that lurked beneath that beauty. Dr. Rodriguez stepped up to speak next, discussing the findings of her research team and the steps being taken to minimize the risk of future attacks. As she listened, Jade felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see Tommy, the lifeguard who had helped rescue her, crouching beside her wheelchair. "Hey, Jade," he said softly. "It's good to see you here. How are you holding up?" Jade managed a small smile. "I'm okay. It's harder than I thought it would be, seeing the ocean again." Tommy nodded understandingly. "I get that. After what you've been through, it'd be weird if you weren't scared. But you know what? You're here. You're facing it. That takes real courage." As the ceremony concluded, people began to mill about on the sand. Many approached Jade, offering words of encouragement and support. It was overwhelming, but also deeply touching. As the crowd thinned, Mia approached, a determined look on her face. "Hey," she said, "do you want to get closer to the water? Not in it, just closer?" Jade hesitated, fear bubbling up inside her. But something in Mia's steady gaze gave her strength. "Okay," she said, "but not too close." Slowly, carefully, Mia pushed Jade's wheelchair towards the water's edge. They stopped several yards from where the waves were lapping at the shore. The sound of the surf was louder here, the salty breeze stronger. Jade closed her eyes, letting the familiar sensations wash over her. The fear was still there, a knot in her stomach and a tightness in her chest. But alongside it was something else, a sense of belonging, of coming home. "You okay?" Mia asked softly. Jade opened her eyes, looking out at the vast expanse of the Atlantic. "Yeah," she said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "Yeah, I think I am." As the sun began to set, painting the sky and sea in brilliant oranges and pinks, Jade realized something. The ocean had nearly taken her life, had certainly changed it forever, but it was also an integral part of who she was. She didn't know if she'd ever surf again, didn't know if she'd ever be able to enter the water without fear. But sitting there with the support of her friend, her family, and her community, Jade felt a flicker of hope. The road ahead would be long and challenging, filled with physical therapy sessions, psychological hurdles, and likely setbacks. But as she watched the waves roll in, Jade made a silent promise to herself. She would face this challenge as she had faced every wave, with determination, courage, and the knowledge that even if she fell, she would always get back up and try again. The Scow. Beach was open again, and with it, a new chapter in Jade's life had begun. It wasn't the future she had imagined for herself, but it was hers to shape. And as the last light faded from the sky, Jade Thompson turned her face to the ocean breeze, ready to meet whatever challenges lay ahead. The early morning sun cast a golden glow over New Smyrna Beach as Jade Thompson stood at the water's edge, her toes sinking into the damp sand. 6 months had passed since the shark attack that had nearly claimed her life and irrevocably altered its course. The physical scars on her leg, while still prominent, had faded from angry red to a softer pink. The emotional scars, however, were taking longer to heal. Jade took a deep breath, inhaling the salty air. Her hands trembled slightly as she watched. The waves roll in, each one bringing a mix of longing and fear. She had come a long way in her recovery, but this moment, facing the ocean alone for the first time since the attack, felt monumental. "You've got this, Jade," she whispered to herself, echoing the words of encouragement she'd heard so often from her family, friends, and therapists. As she stood there, memories of that fateful day flashed through her mind. The excitement of catching, that perfect wave, the sudden terror as she saw the shark, the searing pain as its jaws clamped down on her leg. Jade closed her eyes, using the grounding techniques Dr. Stern had taught her to push away the encroaching panic. "Jade," a familiar voice called out behind her. She turned to see Mia approaching, concern etched on her face. "I thought I might find you here. Are you okay?" Jade managed a small smile. "Yeah, I'm okay. Just facing my fears, I guess." Mia nodded, coming to stand beside her friend. "That's really brave of you. How does it feel?" "Terrifying," Jade admitted, "but also right somehow. Like I needed to do this." The two friends stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the waves. Mia had been a constant source of support throughout Jade's recovery, but Jade knew it hadn't been easy for her either. The attack had left its mark on both of them. "Have you been back in the water yet?" Jade asked, glancing at Mia. Mia shook her head. "No, not yet. I've been thinking about it, but I don't know. It's hard not to think about what happened every time I look at the ocean now." Jade nodded understandingly. "Yeah, I get that. But you know what Dr. Rodriguez said? Shark attacks are incredibly rare. What happened to me was a freak occurrence." "I know," Mia sighed. "Logically, I know that. But fear isn't always logical, is it?" "Tell me about it," Jade agreed, a wry smile on her face. As they talked, more people began to arrive at the beach. Some gave Jade curious glances, recognition dawning on their faces. In the months since the attack, she had become something of a local celebrity, the girl who survived a shark attack and lived to tell the tale. A young boy, no more than 7 or 8, approached them hesitantly, clutching a surfboard that seemed too big for him. "Excuse me," he said, his voice shy. "Are you Jade Thompson?" Jade turned to him, smiling gently. "Yes, that's me. What's your name?" "I'm Tyler," the boy replied. I wanted to be a surfer like you, but now I'm scared of the sharks. How do you do it? How do you go in the water knowing they're out there?" Jade felt a lump form in her throat. She crouched down, bringing herself to Tyler's eye level, mindful of the twinge of pain in her injured leg. "That's a really good question, Tyler," she said. "The truth is I'm still scared too, but you know what? Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you face your fears and do what you love anyway." Tyler's eyes widened. "But what if a shark comes?" Jade glanced at the ocean, then back at Tyler. "Sharks are a part of the ocean, just like we are when we surf. Most of the time, they're not interested in us at all. What happened to me was very, very rare. The important thing is to respect the ocean and all the creatures in it." As Tyler nodded, taking in her words, Jade felt a spark of something she hadn't experienced in months, the desire to get back on a board, to feel the rush of riding a wave again. "Tell you what," she said to Tyler, "how about we make a deal? When I'm ready to get back in the water and surf again, you come with me. We can face our fears together. What do you say?" Tyler's face lit up. "Really? You'd do that?" Jade nodded, surprised to find she meant it. "Really, it might not be for a while. I still have a lot of recovering to do. But when I'm ready, I'll let you know." As Tyler ran off to tell his parents, Mia looked at Jade with a mix of surprise and admiration. "Wow, Jade, that was really something. Are you sure about this?" Jade stood up, wincing slightly as she put weight on her leg. "Yeah, I think I am. I can't let fear control my life forever. Surfing is who I am, Mia. I need to find a way back to it." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the marine biologist who had been studying the local shark population since the attack. "Jade, Mia," she greeted them warmly. "It's good to see you both here. How are you doing, Jade?" Jade smiled at the scientist who had become something of a mentor to her over the past months. "I'm doing okay, Dr. Rodriguez. Just taking it one day at a time." Elena nodded approvingly. "That's the best way to approach it. Actually, I'm glad I ran into you. I wanted to talk to you about something. We're putting together an educational program about shark behavior and ocean safety. We were hoping you might be interested in being involved." Jade's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Me? But I'm not an expert or anything." "No, but you have a unique perspective that could be incredibly valuable," Elena explained. "Your experience, combined with scientific facts, could help people understand sharks better and how to coexist with them safely." As Jade considered the offer, she felt a sense of purpose stirring within her. Maybe this was a way she could make something positive come out of her traumatic experience. "I'd like that," she said finally. "I think it could be really important." Elena beamed. "Wonderful. We can discuss the details later. For now, enjoy your morning at the beach." As Elena walked away, Jade turned back to the ocean. The waves continued, their endless rhythm at once inviting and intimidating. "You know," she said to Mia, "I think I'm ready to read that incident report now." Mia looked surprised. "Are you sure? You've been avoiding it for months." Jade nodded, a determined set to her jaw. "I'm sure. If I'm going to be part of this education program, I need to understand exactly what happened that day." Later that morning, Jade sat in her room, the official incident report spread out before her. Her hands shook slightly as she began to read. On July 15, 2024, at approximately 9:45 a.m., a shark attack occurred at New Smyrna Beach, Florida. The victim, identified as Jade Thompson, 16, was surfing approximately 50 yards offshore when she was bitten on the right leg by what has been confirmed as a bull shark, Carcharodonus leucus, estimated to be 8 to 9 feet in length. Jade read through the clinical description of her injuries, the rescue efforts, and the subsequent investigation. It was surreal to see the most traumatic moment of her life reduced to dry, factual language. As she neared the end of the report, a paragraph caught her eye. Analysis of water samples and sonar readings from the days leading up to the attack showed an unusual concentration of baitfish in the area, likely due to a shift in ocean currents. This abundance of prey may have attracted the bull shark closer to shore than usual. Additionally, the vibrations from surfboards in the water may have been mistaken by the shark for struggling fish, triggering its predatory instincts. Jade sat back, absorbing this information. It wasn't anyone's fault, not hers, not the shark's. Just a series of natural events that had culminated in their paths crossing in the worst possible way. With a deep breath, she picked up her phone and dialed Dr. Rodriguez's number. "Dr. Rodriguez, it's Jade. I've been thinking about the education program. I have some ideas I'd like to discuss." Over the next few weeks, Jade threw herself into working on the shark awareness program. She worked closely with Dr. Rodriguez and her team, helping to craft a message that balanced respect for these ancient predators with practical safety advice for beachgoers. One afternoon, as they were reviewing some materials, Dr. Rodriguez turned to Jade with a thoughtful expression. "You know, Jade, your attitude through all of this has been remarkable. Many people in your position would be advocating for culling sharks or implementing extreme measures. But you've maintained a balanced, educational approach." Jade smiled ruefully. "Don't get me wrong, there are still days when I'm angry about what happened. But the more I learn about sharks, the more I understand that they're not monsters. They're just animals doing what they've evolved to do. We're the ones entering their world." As the launch date for the program approached, Jade found herself back on the beach more and more often. Each visit became a little easier, the knot of fear in her stomach loosening incrementally. One evening, as the sun was setting, she stood at the water's edge, letting the waves wash over her feet. The cool water swirled around her ankles, and for the first time in months, she felt a familiar longing to be out there, riding the waves. Mia joined her, a surfboard tucked under her arm. "Hey, surf sister. Thought I might catch the last waves of the day. Want to watch?" Jade looked at her friend, then at the board, then out at the ocean. The fear was still there, but it no longer felt paralyzing. "Actually," she said slowly, "I think I might join you." Mia's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "You don't have to if you're not ready." Jade nodded, a determined glint in her eye. "I'm sure. I might not be able to stand up yet, but I can paddle out. I need to do this, Mia. I need to be in the water again." As they paddled out together, Jade felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. Every shadow in the water made her heart race, but the familiar feel of the board beneath her, the rhythm of the waves felt like coming home. They stopped just beyond the break, sitting up on their boards. Jade looked back at the shore, marveling at how far she'd come, both literally and figuratively. "You okay?" Mia asked, concern in her voice. Jade turned to her friend, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "Yeah," she said, surprising herself, with how much she meant it. "Yeah, I really am." As they sat there watching the sun sink below the horizon, Jade felt a sense of peace wash over her. The ocean had nearly taken her life, had certainly changed it forever, but it was also an integral part of who she was. She didn't know what the future held, didn't know if she'd ever surf competitively again. But she was here, in the water, facing her fears. The shark was out there somewhere, continuing its ancient existence in the vast ocean, and here was Jade, finding her way back to the world she loved, changed but undefeated. As the last light faded from the sky, Jade Thompson turned her face to the ocean breeze, ready to ride whatever waves life brought her way.